In video 5 of the AOPA Internet Flight Planner tutorial series, we'll be taking a look at chart options, the flight profile view, and printing options for charts. AIFP has two different base chart options, VFR and IFR. Before we dive into overlays and other settings, it's important to note that the base charts in AIFP are rendered real-time from data collections and are known as vector charts. These charts are different than typical scanned paper charts like the FAA sectionals and IFR charts. On scanned charts, whatever details there are printed on the chart are always there, regardless of zoom level. This makes them a little harder to work with at smaller zoom levels since reading the text on the chart eventually becomes impossible. You as a user cannot turn individual details on or off as needed either. With vector-based charts, you have control over what chart details are displayed and which ones are hidden. This helps to unclutter the base chart when you don't need to see certain details. Of course, you can always turn on all chart layers if you would like to have everything displayed for printing. The text on the charts always stays the same size regardless of zoom level, so even at smaller zoom levels, the text is still readable. In addition, some details are automatically hidden at certain zoom levels. This too helps the base chart to remain uncluttered while at smaller zoom levels. As you zoom in far enough, these details will become visible. The zoom levels can vary based on the object type, but logic is applied to determine when certain objects are displayed or hidden. Usually, an object is hidden when the zoom level would be too small in order to interact with it anyway. If you are not seeing something that you think should be on the chart, first check to make sure the proper overlay is turned on, then try zooming in further if the object is still not displayed on the chart. On the screen, we are currently viewing the IFR style base chart. As you can see, this base chart is similar in appearance to the low and high route charts produced by the FAA, typically used for IFR flying. When we switch to the VFR base chart, we see that it looks similar to a traditional sectional chart and shows representations of terrain that are shaded differently to depict elevation. Setting which base chart is used and what overlays are visible is controlled by using the Overlays button in the top right menu bar of the Flight Planner. The first two options are for setting the base chart. Below that, there are 6 categories that allow different layers to be turned on or off. An important feature of these layer options is that you can save how you prefer the layers to be set separately for each style of chart. So the layers you have turned on or off for the VFR chart don't have to be the same layers you use by default for the IFR chart. We'll demonstrate that as we progress with showing the various layers. The first overlay category is routing. Clicking on the small arrow to the left of the category name allows us to expand that section. In the interest of time, we won't demonstrate all available overlays, but you can see that you have many choices. Clicking on each layer will place a check mark in the box which turns on that layer. Mixing and matching layers and base charts allows you to create a hybrid chart that includes elements that are typically only found on VFR charts with elements found on IFR charts. This is impossible with systems that use traditional scanned paper charts. The one layer that I'll point out here is the user-defined waypoints layer. This layer must be on if you want to add user waypoints to your route. As we expand each of the categories, you can get an idea of how many overlay variations are possible. Each category contains a group of related layers that can be enabled or disabled. While the majority of the layers can all be turned on at the same time, there are a few exceptions in the weather section. Let's zoom out here a little so we can see a larger portion of the country. In the weather category, a few of the layers cannot be displayed simultaneously. This is because the information displayed would overlap and create an unusable chart. The radar composite reflectivity layer and the precipitation accumulation layer cannot be enabled at the same time. These checkboxes work more like toggle switches. Turning one on disables the other. Likewise, the METAR station and TAF station layers have to be used independently of each other. When you enable an overlay, you need to use the Apply button at the bottom of the Overlays window to make the layer visible on the chart. This allows you to turn on or off several layers and then apply those changes all at once instead of having to do one at a time. There is a color key in the bottom right corner of the chart that indicates the color representations of the radar layer. The METAR and TAF layers do require that the chart be zoomed in far enough before they will be displayed. The actual zoom factor depends on your screen resolution, but will normally be somewhere around 10 nautical miles per inch. With either the METAR or TAF layer enabled, you can click on the chart icons to get additional weather information. Unlike other objects on the chart, these icons utilize the primary left-click button on the mouse. The icons are color-coded and will have a letter in them indicating the current weather conditions at that reporting station. The options are VFR, Marginal VFR, IFR, and Low IFR. The resulting window that pops up contains the actual METAR or TAF details, and tabs at the top allow for translated or raw display of the text. If you always want certain layers turned on or off, you can set them for each base layer independently. Select the base layer you want to configure, then go through each category and turn on or off the desired layers. Then, click the Save button at the bottom of this window. When done with one base chart, switch to the other base chart at the top and repeat the process of selecting layers, followed by the Save button at the bottom. Now when you return to the flight planner, these layers will be restored to your preference. The Reset button at the bottom returns all layers to the factory or default setting as it was the very first time you loaded the flight planner. Note that the TFR layer is always on and there are no user options that allow it to be turned off. Now let's look at some additional chart options that are in the right toolbar. This toolbar contains buttons that perform different actions on the chart. Some of these were discussed in prior videos of the tutorial series, but we'll review them all here for convenience. Again, in the interest of time, I won't demonstrate each of the buttons as most are self-explanatory. The top button on this bar is the Zoom to Route button. This sets the chart to a zoom level that displays your entire route of flight. The next button is the Pan Chart tool. This button stays enabled by default since it's a common action. Next is the Marquee Zoom tool. This allows you to draw a box around any area of the chart that you want to zoom in on. The next button in the list is the Information Selector. This allows you to single-click on any chart object to get additional details. This is a persistent tool, which means it stays enabled until you click on it again to return your pointer back to the default action. Using this tool is the same as using the right-click or control-click for Mac users that we demonstrated in previous videos. The icon with the orange pushpin is the User-Defined Waypoints tool. This allows you to create user-defined waypoints anywhere you click on the chart. Again, this is a persistent tool, so you'll have to click on it again to disable it. Towards the bottom of the toolbar, the next button is for removing chart highlights. Some elements on the chart can be highlighted on the chart when using the search function. This makes it easier to find that object on the chart. This tool removes those highlights. Depending on what browser you're using, you may or may not see this next button, which is the chart orientation. Not all browsers support this feature. At the time this video was recorded, this feature is not supported in the Internet Explorer browser. This tool flips the orientation of the chart 90 degrees. This can sometimes be helpful when printing certain routes to include more information on the page at a slightly higher zoom ratio. The final button is the Refresh Chart tool. This is the same as doing a browser refresh or pressing F5 on your keyboard. Now let's take a look at another perspective for viewing our route of flight. I'll load a route that I previously created to save time. To load a saved route, click on Route in the top left menu and then select Stored Routes. This will load the route based on the details you entered the last time it was saved. As a reminder, AIFP does not auto-save flight plans when you close the flight planner. So if you make any changes to the route, be sure to use the Save options in the Route menu before you close the flight planner or your browser. With our route loaded, I'll go back to the Route menu and select Profile View. This will open a profile presentation of our route that shows airspace, terrain, and forecast winds aloft. The airspace is shown in the corresponding colors as shown on the actual charts. Forecast winds aloft are shown in white with their traditional arrow and barb symbology. The route shown in profile view is always displayed with the departure airport on the left and the destination airport on the right, regardless of direction of flight. As you can see here, near the end of our flight, we'll have some terrain to be mindful of. We'll have to consider that as we plan our descent point. Click on the X to close this window when finished. For the final topic of this video, we'll take a look at printing the chart. Printing the chart is very easy and very flexible. Essentially, whatever is being displayed on your screen will be printed by using the Print Chart button. This button is located in the upper right of the flight planner. You may want to use the Zoom to Route tool to print a page containing your entire route of flight, or zoom in on smaller sections to print more detailed views. To create custom printed charts, use the various overlays we reviewed earlier in the video to create custom views. As an example, I'll zoom in on the destination area of our flight to Florence, South Carolina. To make that easy, I'll use the Edit Route window and then right-click on the option to center the chart on Florence Regional Airport. If needed, I can zoom in closer using my Marquee Zoom tool or the Zoom Slider tool in the upper right corner of the flight planner. I'll use the slider since it also shows me the zoom factor. I'll set it to around 10 nautical miles per inch and then move the chart with my mouse to include as much as possible on the screen. Now, using the Print Chart button, a new window opens that displays the section we zoomed to. I can then use the Print button at the top to send this to my printer. To maximize the printing on the paper, set your printer to Landscape, which will better match the layout of the chart. Once printed, I can close this window, go back to the flight planner, and repeat as many times as needed to print all sections of my route. I find it easiest to just pan the chart, leaving the same zoom level so it matches up from page to page. This concludes video number 5 of the series. Our next video will cover weather briefings and flight plan filing. Thanks for watching.